Hi, good morning, everyone. How are you? Um, my name is Ignasi Grau. I work for this NGO called OIDEL. What is OIDEL? A little bit just before starting. So OIDEL is a Swiss non-profit NGO working in United Nations. And there what we do is advocacy for right to education and freedom to education. And today, let's see if it works. Yeah. And today I came here to do the pre-launch, preview, pre-presentation of the Freedom of Education Index. We are presenting this document officially next November, so I'm going to share you many parts of it, not everything. And we've been doing this research with Nova Terra Foundation, and I want to thank Luca Volonté, who is here, for their collaboration on this project. So, why we did the Freedom of Education Index? Basically, as I said, OIDEL is focused on the defense of freedom to education in international institutions, and we were wondering what was the status of freedom to education in the institutions. So, in order to have an idea of how are the countries doing, we started doing this research. And to know exactly what were we researching, we asked firstly, what is a citizen holder of when we talk about freedom of education according to the international human rights status? Because, usually many times it's like, yeah, freedom to education, it's nice, that sounds great, but what really is, and what are really our rights? What are the international instruments of human rights really told when they are talking about freedom to education? So, I'm going to just give you 3 examples of 3 big documents of human rights in order you can have an idea of what rights are we holding when we are talking about freedom to education. So, the first right we have here is the Human Declaration of Human Rights, and what is clear and what it told here is the right to choose the kind of educations. The parents have this right recognized in the the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And second, another really important document that is one of the most recent declarations, which is the UNESCO Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity, also recognizes that all persons should have an education that respects their cultural identity, which means religion, which means language, and this is a really important core part of freedom of education. And then the third document I was talking is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which specifies the 2 main things of freedom to education. As you see in the point 30.3, talks about the liberty of parents or legal guardians to choose for their children's schools. So one thing is choosing the schools of our kids, and second thing, which is in 13.4, it's liberty of individuals and bodies to establish and direct educational institutions. So, in one hand, we have the right to choose a school, and the other one, in the other side, this right also recognizes the right to establish the schools. We think, and it's not only our opinion, there are many sentences on this line that this thing, in order to make it happen, the state have to play a role, like states have to play a role in order to help people to choose a school. In the same way, when we are talking about right to health, the state is helping us to, to be provided with health. It is not, yeah, you have the right to health. If you have money, you just go there. So with freedom of education, we expect the same. We expect the state to help us with that. Okay, so let's talk about this research. The Freedom of Education Index is a research that contains information about 136 countries, and it's based in 94% of worldwide population. Okay, now I'm going to talk about methodology. Usually it's one of the most boring parts, so I'm going to try to make it quick, okay? So basically, methodology is based on 4 questions. The first question is we were asking is is there a legal possibility to create and manage non-governmental schools? And this thing, inside this question, there were 3 questions. Is this recognized by the law? Is there a mention of freedom of education in the Constitution? And third, what about homeschooling? How is the status of homeschooling in these countries? The second question, as I say, to make this right a thing, we need the collaboration of the states. So what we were asking here is like, does public funding for non-governmental schools exist? And if yes, what costs are subsidized by the state? And depending on the help, or depending on the subsidies, we were ranking these countries in different ways. Okay, the third question we were asking was net enrollment rate in primary education. Why did we put this indicator? And many people were asking, like, why net? I thought you were talking about freedom of education, not right to education. Well, as freedom of education is part of right to education, if a country is great in freedom to education, but then there is only, let's say, 50% of students in a school, it makes no sense to have freedom of education. So we thought it was really important to also assess the net enrollment rate. And finally, our last question is enrollment rate in non-governmental schools as percentage of total. Why this question? Well, because if a country have everything recognized and they give a lot of money, but then no one is in private schools, it means that really, like, it's not working, the kind of system they are creating. So that's why we also did this question. Okay, this is the formula we have been using. If someone have questions later, I mean, I don't think you want me talking about 5 minutes about this formula, so I can go back to this. Okay, let's talk about the results. As we see here, we have been dividing the results on the educational regional areas that UNESCO is using. So, as you can see, Europe and North America region is the one that have more freedom of education index, followed by almost the same results as Asia and the Pacific, and Latin and the Caribbean. And then in the bottom we have Africa and the Arab states. Here you have like a map of the situation. It comes to red to yellow. It's not really clear, I think, but well, we can kind of see like Ireland is in the top, the Netherlands are in the top, the UK are in the top, Spain are in the top. So, and then in the bottom we have like some countries that also have like, it's kind of a thing many times that countries that have less freedom of education are also the countries that have less freedom. Like here we can see North Korea, for instance. We can see China, etc. Okay. This is the status of Europe. I don't know if you can read it. Is there like a laser here or no? Yeah, great. Okay. So in Europe we have like here the best countries, which are like Ireland, Netherlands, and Belgium. These are the countries, the kind of countries that are doing great. They are 100% accomplishing what we are expecting countries to do concerning free education. And here in the bottom, we have Belarus, Bosnia, and Andorra. And then I'm sad to say that, but there is Croatia. Although I've been doing a bit of research about Croatia before coming here to see, like, let's see if we can improve the situation. And I know Croatia is doing great things concerning, like, rights to minorities in education, about e-schools, pilot projects. I know you are doing many things that can be really good for freedom to education in a future, but still, as far as I have seen, there is no help for families who want to have their own school, so that's why it's placed here. And a really interesting thing I see yesterday we were talking about the importance of family and how much the states care about families, and Slovakia, who is here, and the other one is Hungary, which is here, are countries that used to be like at the back. And thanks, usually when the government cares about families, when the government thinks like empowering families is good for the state, they always do big steps in order to improve freedom of education. And we can see the same in this index, that they are really well placed here. Okay, we will see this later if we have time. Okay, allocation on financial aid. When there is this debate, and this is really interesting, people usually say like, yeah, we wouldn't mind to help you, private schools or non-governmental schools, but no one is doing that. Which kind of modern country is giving money to non-governmental institutions? Well, what we have seen in these research is like only 28% of the countries don't give anything to the non-governmental schools. The rest of them, somehow, they did something. So we have 7% of countries that give everything. They give the salaries of the teachers, they give the operating costs, and they even provide these schools with the initial investment. Then there is like this, we have like 30% of the countries in the world, they provide these schools with salaries of teachers and operating costs, which is kind of a big thing. 10% of these countries are providing at least with salaries of teachers. And then finally, 43%, they give some kind of help. Like sometimes it's just some regions, sometimes they just help at the beginning, but somehow these 43% of countries give some kind of help to non-governmental institutions. Okay. So this is the evolution, the evolution of freedom of education in the world. As we can see here, the situation overall is improving in all the regions, which is great, and somehow they are improving all the same. More specifically, the countries that have improved more the situation since 2002 are Ecuador, Guatemala, Israel, Iceland, Jordan, Slovakia, and Peru. And the countries which situation have gotten worse since 2002 is Costa Rica. It's France here. I'm sorry, France shouldn't be here. If there is any French, I'm really sorry for you. You shouldn't be here. So it's Costa Rica, Honduras, Congo, Democratic Republic, Malaysia, and Pakistan. Okay, homeschooling situation. Not many people is interested on that, so that's why I put it here. So how is the homeschooling situation in the world? Well, overall it's improving, as you can see. Like, especially in Europe and North America, there are many countries that are starting to recognize homeschooling explicitly, and also in Latin America. This means, like, in Europe right now, like 23% out of 30 countries are recognizing it. In Latin America and the Caribbean, it's 7 out of 20, like, which is good. 2 new countries have recognized it in the last years. And in the Asia and the Pacific, it's around 7 out of 20. And in Africa, as you see, like, there are some countries that have forbid this, have banned that explicitly in the last years. Okay, more specifically about homeschooling. Well, despite the growth of homeschooling, there are still like some countries that are struggling with the recognition of homeschooling. And actually there are some countries that have explicitly banned homeschooling in the last years. I just want to focus on these 3 ones, which are Spain, my country, yeah, we are that bad, I'm sorry, Nicaragua, and Sweden. And then Germany, it's still a really big deal. They still maintain the ban for homeschooling. Besides, there are many parent associations trying and fighting in order to recognize these rights. Okay, this is really interesting. So what we have done, and we have many graphics like this, we have seen like freedom of education is a cornerstone for democracies, for strong democracies, for individual liberties. And here we have like this is the freedom in the world. This is an index developed for House of Freedom, which is an American NGO that do an amazing work, like trying to assess liberties in the world. And what we see is like the countries that have more freedom and individual rights are also the countries that have more freedom of education. And also in the bottom, we can see like the countries that have less freedom. Like here we have our friends of Cuba. They are usually the ones that have like less freedom of education. And it's kind of clear, like if we only if we give the full responsibility to educate our kids only to the state, somehow it's like things that happen. Like it's at the end you have like less individual freedoms. We also have seen this. I didn't put you here, but we also have crossed our data with good governments, and we have seen that also the more transparent, the more the governments that are working the best usually are the governments, I mean, not the best, like their economy is doing great, but that there are more civil guarantees, that there are more rights recognized, etc. Usually are the countries where freedom of education is more protected. Okay, So trends, what is happening, what we have seen, which kinds of things we are seeing that are developed in Europe with this research. We still think and we still see that there is kind of a struggle in Southern Europe concerning NGS funding. As you know, there are many southern states that are doing great concerning that, like Spain, it's financing, for instance, like most of the private education, to say it, to make it easier. But then there is still this hodgepodge between NGS, non-governmental schools, and Catholic schools, which people are mixing these two things all the time, and it's every time we are having this debate, any new legislature in Spain, Italy, France, and Portugal, we have to discuss about the funding of non-governmental schools, because there is a lot of mix, which somehow it's normal, between non-governmental schools and Catholic schools. While in Northern Europe, and by Northern Europe I mean Nordic states and Anglo-Saxon countries, the debate between public education and religious schools is almost inexistent. Like, it's kind of a thing, like, this is countries that really guarantee rights, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of clear, like, parents should have the right to educate their kids in the way they want. There is this sad exception, which is Sweden, that these last years they have started to put some difficulties to parents to raise their kids in their faith. This clavage, or this kind of difference, north-south in Europe, it also is concerning single-sex education. Like, it's kind of a super big deal, and there are many huge debates in the south, while in the north, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not a big thing, single-sex education, but they are like, if someone wants to go for it, yeah, let's do it. Okay, good practices. With this thing we have seen, like, and this can help to people in Croatia somehow to try to think about ways to develop non-governmental schools, institutions here. We have seen that many countries are doing good progress on that. So, in England they have been developing these academies and free schools with great success. It's something that has to be commented, and have enabled parents to enlarge their offer of schools they can choose, and also have improved the results, which is really good. In Spain, one thing they have done in order to improve the situation of freedom of education is, like, the state have started to provide the schools that want, I mean, non-governmental schools with public land, in order to make easier to people to exercise this right of creating non-governmental schools. Then in America, in the US, there has been this growth of charter schools, especially in states like Florida, California, Wisconsin, which is really interesting somehow, because many times when people are talking about freedom of education, they are like, freedom of education is like really conservative. I'm sure many of you have. And it's like, well, in the US, where most of these schools are growing, are in some of the more liberal states. So it's not even, there is not even a debate on this thing. Then in Latin America, especially in Ecuador, there has been this institution really interesting that is growing and is enabling parents to bring their kids in non-governmental school, which is the Escuelas Fiscomisionales, sorry. And this kind of institution is really interesting because also proves us, like, make freedom of education happen. It's not always a thing of budget or money. It's like, because these kind of countries, they are kind of humble, and anyway they are struggling and they are fighting in order to make sure their parents can choose the education of their kids. And lately, Africa. As you know, like, Africa is a country where there is this big issue coming up, which is privatization. Like, the states are not fulfilling the basic content of the right to education. They are not even providing for education, so it has enabled private institutions to go there and make money with right to education, which is, like, kind of sad, because no one really has the control of that. No one really knows what are they doing, and they are not even recognized. So kids that goes to this school, then they cannot go to university because they don't have recognized titles. So it's really interesting in Africa, because, like, we have started seeing, like, many countries that we cannot say they are funding the schools, but they are start helping non-governmental schools, like religious institutions, like, okay, we cannot do education. You are great on that. We know you are doing great. So we can help you, we can give you some land, we can give you many little money in order you can start. So we have seen, like, in Africa, the phenomenon of privatization has been, they are trying to finish it by helping non-governmental schools. Okay, thank you very much. Just, I mean, if you want to know more about this interesting issue, I'll let you hear my email, the email address, the web of my NGO, the blog, and yeah, if you have Twitter, you also can follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much.